Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 405. What's going on, everybody? So, tonight was a very interesting UFC card. Conor McGregor got his big mouth shut by Dustin Poirier. Dustin Poirier absolutely poured it on in the second round and put Conor McGregor to sleep, hit him with some bombs. And the funny thing about MMA is there's definitely two kinds of fighters in MMA. There's the guys who have lost and the girls who have lost and those who will lose. There really aren't too many undefeated fighters in MMA. Khabib is an anomaly, right? We had Fedor Emelianenko for quite some time. And then, of course, John Jones, his only loss is a disqualification. So, there are some folks who have extraordinary runs in MMA. But eventually, if you stick around the sport long enough, you're going to get found out. And it's going to be your day. And today certainly was Conor McGregor's day. Now, this is the second time that these two dudes had fought. And 5 years ago, McGregor beat Poirier. So I'm guessing we'll probably see number 3 pretty soon in the next few months. That would be my guess. Poirier is definitely going to be in, big money for him. And McGregor, obviously, well, the motivation will be to try and win back that L. When you're a fighter and you lose to somebody, you really want to win a fight against them the next time to take that L back. So I could definitely see them setting this up, and it makes sense from a business standpoint too, right? So anyway, that's where I've been tonight. That's why this has been, this is going to be a little bit late, this episode here. And I'll tell you what, I'm pretty tired, folks. A long day. Had some technical issues trying to get the pay-per-view to lock in. And then even before that, I did some adventuring earlier this morning, scouting out some camping sites like I was talking about, and now I look at the clock, it's 10:41. I'm like, holy cow, I better get into the studio and pump this episode out. So tomorrow there won't be a morning update probably. There'll be a couple of flashback episodes, and then of course the live stream tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So if you haven't joined us during the live stream, you definitely want to check it out. Last weekend was a great time. We had just a really good conversation, a really engaging conversation, and you never know who's going to pop in to the live stream and chat with you folks. So if you haven't checked it out yet and something you might be interested in, tomorrow, 7 p.m., a link will be in the description box. Now, I'm sure all of you are getting this podcast from different platforms, Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, certainly not iTunes, but any one of those, right? So make sure you're subscribed to wherever you're getting this podcast from, and make sure if you want to have no issues of the podcast popping up, make sure you subscribe over at Spreaker.com. And always in the description box, there will be a link to the article we discuss and a couple of other things that have to do with the episode. So make sure you're checking out those description boxes. All right, so tonight, our article is from the New York Post. And we're going to talk about how Ghislaine Maxwell got swooped up by the FBI. Obviously, we know that they used her cell phone to track her, and then that's how they swooped in for the kill using the Stingray equipment and tracking her through, their various means of spycraft. And this article tonight's going to talk about that a little bit more, add a little more context, a little more meat to the bone, as I like to say. And of course, this is a topic that's very interesting, right? I think it's important to know how she was tracked down by the FBI and how they went about reeling her in. because it's obvious she was ducking and dodging for quite some time. I mean, remember, they had to make the very odd move of serving her via email. When do you ever hear of that? Someone getting served via email? How is that even binding, right? I mean, I was always under the impression they had to serve you physically with papers. But I guess you can get, in extreme circumstances, if you can't be located, I guess via email is okay. But it just goes to show you the lengths that Maxwell was going to be under the radar. Now, I have my doubts about the FBI ever losing track of her. I mean, maybe, they didn't have some sort of investigation per se, raging against her. But I'm sure there were a few agents that were investigating the case overall that were still keeping tabs on Ghislaine Maxwell. She's, somebody, once Epstein was arrested, I think that all bets were off. And right away, I believe that investigators automatically pivoted to Ghislaine Maxwell once Epstein was arrested, then especially after he was dead. And I doubt that Maxwell was really too far off of the radar. I doubt that she would have been able to use conventional means to escape from the country, right? But with her power, her money, her reach, and the relationship she has with certain people, her leaving the country by non-usual means is certainly not out of the realm, right? Just because she can't get on a flight, she's on some sort of watch list or whatever she might have been on, doesn't mean that privately she can't get out of the country. And I think that being in New Hampshire, where the place was located, I think that's something that factored in to her desire to live there. Of course, it was secluded, right? Out of the way, not too many people around. Obviously, that goes into it. But there's a lot of places that are secluded. At this point, I don't believe that there are any coincidences with these people. And the fact that she was so close to the Canadian border there in New Hampshire and not so far away from Montreal, considering her ties to France, not only her passport and her citizenship, but her relationships, friendships, and otherwise. So I don't think it's a coincidence that she was found in New Hampshire, and I don't think it's a coincidence that they made their move when they did. My guess is they were probably acting on some sort of intelligence of some sort. Now, I don't know if that intelligence was she was going to flee or whatever. I don't know. But it certainly looks to me that they pounced on her when they did for a reason, right? They didn't just wake up one day and say, all right, today's the day. There's a method to their madness. And when it comes to the federal government, they always have schemes built into plots, built into conundrums, right? They're always up to something. So it's very interesting, to say the least, in my opinion, that she was found in New Hampshire where she was, because there were plenty of options on the table for her from that location. Why not disappear into a place like northern Nevada where there is nobody? I mean, we have like 4 million people in the whole state, but vast areas of emptiness. I mean, if you want to disappear, the American Southwest is certainly a good place to do so. There are plenty of places she could have disappeared, but she chose New Hampshire. And the feds tracked her using her cell phone. And eventually that's how they were able to get the warrant and then prosecute the arrest, right? Get her, arrest her, bring her in, and now she's rotting away in jail as she awaits her day in front of a judge and a jury, like any common schmo amongst us. That's how the justice system is supposed to work. No special treatment. You don't get special treatment because you have dough. You're not supposed to. Same treatment anyone else would get. Oh, it takes a year to build the case. Well, sorry, you got to sit in jail. That's the way it works. And the fact that she's getting a little taste of that, a dose of that reality, is, I think is a good thing, because if anyone deserves the karma train, it most certainly is Ghislaine Maxwell, in my opinion. So tonight our article is from the New York Post, and the headline, How Ghislaine Maxwell Was Nabbed by the FBI Via Her Cell Phone. The author of this article is Melanie Gray. Ghislaine Maxwell spotted the agents, heard them shout FBI, and ran to another room inside her secluded New Hampshire compound, slamming the door behind her. Yeah, it sounds like somebody who, is just willing to be arrested and turn herself over. What did she think was happening here? What did she think this was a hit? She's part of the mob. She's part of the Gambino family or something. What is she so worried about? Are you worried about your associates, Ghislaine? What do you have on them? Got some dirt, maybe? Well, now's the time to speak up, right? But I mean, really? She runs into another room from the house? I know, that's what the security told her to do, but give me a break. So, these guys are... I'm sure they weren't plainclothes people who showed up at the door. I'm sure they were wearing those blue FBI jackets. Everybody knew who they were, and she still ran to the other room and hid out and tried to hide out. What is she going to do? Get into a standoff with the FBI? Does she think her security is going to get into some sort of altercation with the FBI in order to protect her? That's not going to happen. So what are you running into the other room for, Ghislaine? On a desk was a cell phone wrapped in tinfoil, a clue that prosecutors claim shows just how far the accused sex trafficker, much better than calling her a socialite, by the way, went to avoid being traced. But the cell phone was her undoing after months in hiding. One she used under the name G-Max to talk with secret husband Scott Borgerson. I mean, how childish. Look, you're on the lam, you're on the run. You can't be calling your dude on the cell phone. You guys got to cohabitate if you want to chop it up, right? You got to be if you're on the lam, you got to do like these mob dudes would. You got to disappear into the wind. A suitcase full of dough, and a nice vacation down on the Mexican Riviera. But no. Old Serpentini over here can't even do that. She's so brazen in what she does that she's like, screw it. I'll just go bounce around from this chalet in Colorado. I'll go couch surf over at my homie's house over here real quick. And then I'll buy this $1 million hideaway here in New Hampshire. And that's where I'll post up. That's where that's where I'll hang out, and we'll just wait on, whatever will be, will be. It's unbelievable to think that this lady really thought that she could hide her cell phone in tinfoil. That's not how any of this works. She needs a Faraday cage if she truly wanted to hide this phone. And that's why it's obvious she's not a spy in the traditional sense. She, like Epstein, as I've said for quite some time now, were both assets being run by Lord knows who, right? It's muddled. My guess is the CIA was heavily involved. But at the end of the day, nobody knows. That's a lot of speculation. But she was, in my opinion, an asset and not a real spy. A real spy would have covered their tracks. A real spy wouldn't have been tracked through the phone, right? So, on July 2nd, 24 agents stormed the compound and arrested Maxwell for allegedly conspiring with ex-lover and convicted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein to lure and groom teenage girls for him. She has pleaded not guilty to the charges. He killed himself in jail, allegedly. So 24 agents. Can you imagine? Over 24 agents storming this place. I wish we had some video of that. Like the video at Roger Stone's pad. Let's get some video like this of Ghislaine Maxwell getting her house raided. That shit would have been epic. You know, when you get like a clip sometimes and you can't help yourself, you just have to keep rewinding it and watching it over and over. I'd have to do that because, boy, that'd be enjoyable. Imagine seeing her face. These agents just kicking the door in, her scurrying for cover into another room, 24 agents pouring into the house. I can only imagine what was going through her head. I'm sure she didn't expect bologna sandwiches, though, folks, I promise you. The FBI had been tracking the Serpent's number with cell tower data, but couldn't come any closer than a square mile of her exact whereabouts. So, the feds turned to the cellular intercept, a technology that NYU professor Ted Rappaport helped pioneer. And this kind of technology, just so we're clear, folks, I am not comfortable with it. Honestly, this is like an invasion of privacy to a level that is very uncomfortable to me. And I know people out there will say, well, if you ain't doing nothing illegal, what do you got to worry about? That's really not the point for me. And we won't get into it here on this podcast. We'll save it for another time, right? But I'm not a fan of this sort of behavior from the FBI. The FBI is a bunch of smarmy sons of bitches, as I've said a million times, and I don't trust them at all. So when they're scooping up numbers like this and cloning numbers and using stinger operations and clone cell towers, it's pretty uncomfortable for me, honestly. I'm not even a fan of them tapping phones unless it's a very stringent process, because I know they cut corners. And it's sad but true, right? We have to understand we're dealing with other human beings, the human element. They want to close cases as much as people want to get off on the cases. So if you think that they're above cheating and cutting corners or using loopholes, we know that they're not. So when it comes to this kind of technology, I'm very iffy on it, folks. Every cell phone has two unique numbers: a mobile identification number, MIN, and an international mobile subscriber identity, IMSI, that make tracking the location possible, Rappaport told the Post. So what they're telling you here is, if you want to be an international criminal, you want to go on the run, ditch the cell phone. All right? You're going to have to not have your video games or your Instagram if you want to be an international criminal who's on the run. Because if you keep your cell phone, you're going to get nailed eventually. That's why when people talk about, oh, you're going to get implanted with a microchip, I'm like, bro, do you run around with a cell phone in your pocket? You're already implanted. It might not be a shot into your arm. You didn't get the jab, but everywhere you go, that phone is recording the data. So is it really different? In the Maxwell case, the FBI obtained a search warrant July 1st that allowed agents to both send and receive signals from the fugitive's cell phone. You imagine that? Think about that for a second. Again, if you're going to be a criminal, stay off of the cell phone. Stay off of a landline. It's not going to work out well for you. Why do you think the mafia dudes stopped using cell phones and started doing things called like the walk and talk, or go out to the beach and face the ocean and cover their mouths with their hands as they talked? Because the FBI has all kinds of ways to listen in on you, spy on you, and find out what the hell it is that not only you're doing, but what you're talking about. So the moral of the story is, being a criminal is probably not a good idea these days. How agents exactly hunted down Maxwell wasn't laid out in court documents, but law enforcement agencies use two kinds of devices. One that plucks a transmission out of the air, like Rappaport's cell scope receiver created in the late 1980s, and one that masquerades as a cell tower. That's what I'm talking about. That kind of stuff is just, it's scary to me, right? Because now it's great when they're using it against Ghislaine Maxwell, right? Or Jeffrey Epstein, or somebody that we consider to be scummy. But what happens when they turn it on us? What happens when they turn it on regular citizens who have done nothing wrong? And we all know that there's plenty of times where regular citizens have been caught up in cases where they have been absolutely innocent. while the FBI or another federal agency is adamant that they're not. So again, I'm not very comfortable with this kind of stuff. I think there's plenty of other evidence that they could have used. How about some good old police work? Hell, hire the dog, the bounty hunter guy. Him and his mullet would be all over the case and they'd find her. They'd have the other guy there, what's his name, Leland? Yeah, right, that guy will come in the door, make some moves, kick in the door. I'm the bounty hunter. You mean to tell me that you guys couldn't find her, you didn't know where she was, and you had to go to the extreme of using a cloned cell tower? I don't know. I don't know. I'm very uncomfortable with that kind of stuff. An invasion of privacy is something I take very seriously. A receiver, also called an ISM eye catcher, intercepts a transmission. Silly thing, hang on. Alright, sorry about that. Intercepts a transmission over the airwaves, locks onto it, and allows a user to follow it with a directional antenna to find out where it's coming from, said Rappaport 60, founding director of NYU Tandon's Wireless Research Center. How come all of these people work at the same kind of universities? All of these Ivy League-esque universities, the people that come up with these dastardly, draconian, crazy-ass inventions. I mean, could Edward Snowden have been any more spot on when he was warning us about what was going on? The more we learn, the more terrified I get. I mean, how long before on the TV it's going to be broadcast the mustachios? I mean, I'm starting to feel a lot like Winston Smith, folks. And he points out a transmission doesn't have to be a call, but simply a registration or a heartbeat that the cell phone gives off every so often to indicate it's on. So, again, if it was guaranteed that it was just the number in question that was getting caught up in this, and there was a warrant from a court, then, alright, I guess, if you're using it to pursue someone like Maxwell, and it's okay under the law, then fine. I'm still not super comfortable with it, but there would have to be a lot of levels of safeguards so that I know it's not being abused. I don't trust the federal government. And while it's fine right now, right, and we want them to use it right now, of course, because anything that helps Ghislaine Maxwell go to prison and pay for the alleged crimes that she has committed, then I'm all for it, right? But I just think it's a slippery slope, and we have to be very careful how far we're willing to cede our liberties for, perceived safety. I think it's a very fine line. A cell tower imposter, also called a cell site simulator, broadcasts a signal that's stronger than a service provider's tower, tricking a cell phone into connecting with it instead. Civil liberties advocates fiercely object to all kinds of surveillance technologies, especially cell site simulators, contending they both violate people's privacy and Fourth Amendment, which prohibits unreasonable searches and seizures. So, again, that's the argument, right? And, like usual, in most arguments where I'm not 100% sure, I am willing to be swayed one way or the other. I have to have all of the evidence before me, right, before I can be locked into an opinion. And even then, you have to be ready to move off of your stance or your worldview if evidence is presented to you that is real and tangent. Because if not, then you're just stubborn and pig-headed, and you're just in love with being right and feeding your confirmation bias. This tech that mimics a cell tower isn't just picking up the unique serial number, it's getting lots of others nearby. That's what I was talking about. ACLU staff attorney Nathan Freed Wessler told the Post, and that's what scares me, right? As you're swooping up, say, Ghislaine Maxwell's, you're getting Tom, Dick, Harry, and Jane's, and they're certainly not the target of any investigation. So should their rights to privacy be invaded? Again, it's a slippery slope, and I don't 100%. I've never dug into this topic deep enough to really know one way or the other. But when it comes to civil liberties and this sort of thing, I'm pretty staunch in how I feel. I think there's other ways to go about this without trampling on the rights of other citizens. The Justice Department does require bystander data to be deleted as soon as a cell phone is located and can be kept no longer than 30 days. See, again, how can we trust that they're going to delete it? And that's the rub, right? If the federal government would have acted right previously and recently, then we could have given them some leeway and say, all right, well, that's the way the government has set things up as far as the law goes. The Department of Justice and the FBI are acting within that law. And, they're decent people. We can trust them not to go through this data or use it against us. But that's not reality. That's not the case. We know that political warfare occurs. We know that this sort of data is used against people. And it's kind of uncomfortable for me. I don't like it. Still, there's the inherent danger that police suck up information and violate people's privacy, Wessler told the Post. Until a policy change 5 or 6 years ago, he said, the FBI quite frequently used cell site simulators without warrants. And it's not just the FBI that could use these. People could use them too. So you got to be real careful with your cell phone data and all of that jazz. Use a VPN or whatever may have you, but just be careful because you never know what sort of character is up to no good. And it's crazy that we live in a world like that, but you got to really be on guard because it's not just the FBI that uses this stuff. I was Googling around, just doing a little cursory look, and you can buy this kind of stuff online, Amazon and elsewhere. Not very expensive either, $1,500 on the low end, but it gets up there expensive, obviously. But you can get this kind of stuff, and normal people can use it, and that shit is dangerous. It's terrifying, honestly, if you're somebody who values privacy at all. Agents had a warrant to go after Maxwell, though Wessler predicted her lawyers would file a motion asserting the FBI violated their client's Fourth Amendment rights, a standard argument in all kinds of criminal defense cases. It's not going to work. This is the law. They got the warrant. The law is in place. I don't think it's arguable that they're well within their rights to do this. The question really is more of a societal one at this point. Do we as a society feel comfortable with the law saying that this is allowed to happen, right? Them scooping up all of this data, even the metadata stuff. That has to end. I'm not a fan of any of it, folks. I am not a fan of it. It's leading us down a very dark path, and it's not a place I want to go. For Wessler, a positive development stemming from the Maxwell case is the unsealing of an affidavit for the search warrant in a matter of months. Often, it takes a very long time, and it's hard for the public to know what kind of invasion technology that the government is using. And I think that we're seeing a lot of that, right? The transparency in this case, there's been a lot of it recently because of the outcry. I think because of the lack of transparency from the jump, that we're going to see a lot more transparency during this portion of the trial and this portion of the case. And I think you see that as he's talking about here with the unsealing of the affidavit, because it's really something that it takes a while a lot of times for them to release all of the details. The government slow walks things more than anybody. And it's no different with something like an affidavit. So that's how the government got Ghislaine Maxwell. That's how they tracked her. That's the software they used. And frankly, the software is terrifying. This time there was a good outcome, right? Because old Serpentino is behind bars because of this tracking software. But I don't I don't think it's something that we should be comfortable with as a society, or that the police should be using often. It should be used in very special circumstances, and it should be under the jurisdiction of a warrant from a court, and the judge should be very, very stringent about what sort of data is even collected. And maybe even after every day that data is collected, that data should be turned over to the judge as it's collected, and the judge should decide what's what. And I know we can't, always trust the judges either, but at some point we have to work with the system that we have in place. And it makes the roundabout too. We have to elect better people, right? But there has to be some sort of regulation and guidelines when it comes to this sort of data collection and basically spying on people in the United States. And if it was just the subject, I'd be able to swallow it down because it would be done under the warrant. But clearly, like it says in the article, others are swooped up in it. And that's where my problem is. So what do you folks think? Are you folks comfortable with this sort of data collection? Say if it was happening in your neighborhood and your data was caught up in it and your name was caught up in it, would you be comfortable with that? Definitely a question that is worth talking about. So pop into the live stream tomorrow night, 7 p.m., and let me know what you think. If you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI@protonmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter at BOBBY_CAPUCCI. All of the links that go with this episode can be found in the description box. And remember, folks, make sure you're subscribed to the show, either on Spreaker or Spotify or iHeart or wherever you get your podcast. Make sure that you're subscribed so that the second it uploads, it's right there for you to check out. All right, everybody, I will be back tomorrow for the live stream. Remember, there'll be a few flashback episodes prior to that, but the one episode live, new content tomorrow will be the live stream, 7 p.m. All right, everybody, until then, I hope you're all enjoying or enjoyed your Saturday night, and if you're out, please do not drink and drive. Have a great one, everybody.